Hey guys, here we are. We are ready to review the third FRQ practice. So please make sure you go on Canvas and you go on the AP Human Geography class, and under assignments you find this FRQ practice number 3 and you access the peer grading part. So please, before you watch this, go on. You're going to do the peer grading. Remember, you're going to assign the points that the student earns, and you're going to, in the comments section, make comments for each one, whether or not you take the points away, or if they earn the point, you're going to justify each one. You're going to say why you think they got the point or why they didn't get the point. Remember, there are no half points. I still see some of you trying to put half points. It's 0 point or 1 point. They cannot have a half point. So again, go on, let's find your peer edit and let's get started. So here we are. Let's go to question A. A says define the concept of the multinational state. This is a country with multiple culture groups or multiple ethnic groups that are under a single government who have a history of self-rule. You need to have the part about the history of self-rule. Let me just add that to mine right now. That's not on here, and it should be. So they must have that history of self-rule. And what that means is that would be like in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is a multinational state. And what that means is in the history of these groups, that United Kingdom is made up of Northern Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales. And in their history, each of those were their own independent countries. Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales. They were all separate countries, and whether by choice or by force, they have combined to form one larger multinational state. So again, it's that there's a country with multiple culture or ethnic groups, and those have a history of their own self-rule. Please make the mark there. Again, they either get all points or 0 points. So 1 point or 0 point. They can't get a half point here. So please review their definition. Next is B. Explain how ethnicity can be a factor that leads to the devolution of a state. Remember, the devolution of a state is the demand for more autonomy for groups against the central government, against the government of the country. So devolution is as you begin to see more demands for autonomy against the central government, the federal government of the state. So any of these would be acceptable answers. 1, ethnic differences, ethnocentrism, or ethnic separatism can be a source of conflict between culture groups or between one ethnic group and a government. 1 or more ethnic groups may control a government while another ethnic group has limited political power. Could be that there's ethnic nationalist political parties may compete for political power or attempt to gain control of territory. Can be an ethnic group existing with a territory shared with other culture groups may attempt to gain control through armed conflict, ethnic cleansing, or terrorism. Could be irredentism, which is when a country may attempt to annex or regain territory in a neighboring state inhabited by people who have ethnic ties back to that country. That would be like what what Russia did that would be what Russia has done with the part in Ukraine. And the last one here is that an ethnic group may desire to establish its own nation state or agree to establish an autonomous region within an existing country. So an ethnic group may want to establish its own nation state, or they may agree to establish an autonomous region, so one that acts independently within an existing country. So all of these are ways that ethnicity can be a factor that leads to the devolution of the state. So again, please take a look at your peer's answer here. Read through, make sure they have identified what about the ethnicity. Was it ethnic differences? there are one or more ethnic groups, ethnic national political parties, that there's more than one ethnic group in a particular area and one wants to get rid of that. What is the ethnic factor? And then they have to explain that. So you can see the first part here, they have the factor of ethnic differences, ethnocentrism, and ethnic separatism. And then the explanation follows. How does it create it? It can be a source of conflict between the culture groups. So please take a look at yours and see if they have that there. Sign that point in the explanation. C, explain how communication technology plays an important role in the goals of devolutionary groups and democracy movements. So any of these are fine. Personal computers, personal communication devices, cell phones. These can be used to connect people who support a common ethnic, religious, or political desire to devolve the state or reform the government. So that would be like that they use technology like their phones or social media or digital capabilities like Facebook to communicate with one another, to participate in this common ethnic, religious, or political desire to devolve or separate again away from the state or get more representation in the government, reform the government. This is sort of what they've done through Hong Kong, participating using different communication devices. Apps for social networking. Again, we know what those are. Snapchat, Facebook, can be used to connect people who support a common ethnic, religious, or political desire to separate against the state, or reform the government, or participate in a civil conflict, or revolutionize. Radio, television, news, or the internet can be used to broadcast different ethnic, religious, or political groups, their intent to devolve the state or to reform the government or to rebel against the government. Ethnic, religious, or political groups who intend to separate away from the government or act out against the government or demand more autonomy from the government or to reform or rebel against the government can develop their own apps, their own websites, their own channels, or their own news stations to use. So again, any of these would be acceptable answers. Please check yours and you're going to mark here. Next, D, explain the limitation of communication technology in furthering the goals of devolutionary groups and democracy movements. So last question, we talked about how they can further them. How can these have limitations? So governments can shut down all cell phone towers, data networks, or satellite uplinks to prevent any social networking. Governments can filter or block information entering their country via the internet or on social network sites. Governments can ban media from broadcasting information, news, sites, or other media regarding an ethnic, religious, or political groups who intend to devolve against the state or reform the government, basically isolating those groups. Governments can counter devolutionary groups and democracy movements with pro-government apps and information, news, and media, or the governments can use surveillance software, electronic warfare, or counter-espionage, which is spy techniques, to hack or destroy the networks run by these devolutionary groups and democracy movements, or at least identify the people in those groups and then close down those movements. So again, go ahead, check your person's answer. You're going to assign either 0 point or 1 point, and then you have to justify that 0 or 1 point. They should again have an explanation here. The limit to the technology and how does that limit their devolutionary movement. E, describe one central force that governments use to promote the state as a nation. So we're talking about centripetal force. How do they unite people around their country? They can promote political nationalism, ethnic nationalism, patriotism so that's the force. And then they do it how? Through forms of identity such as symbols, flags, national monuments, their national songs, folklore. So those are the stories and the history, which would be like a Paul Revere or George Washington's March. Sports and the national sports, holidays like July 4th, military traditions, which we would have like Veterans Day, Memorial Day, or other traditions of the country, which would be like Pledge of Allegiance before you start school and during school or singing the national anthem. Any of these would be that ways that governments use centripetal force to promote the state as a nation, as a group that is unified and that is collective. Please 0 or 1 here. Again, there needs to be an explanation. They can't just have listed the centripetal force there. They need to explain how that government uses it to promote the state as a nation or unify its people around the idea of the country. F, explain how uneven development within a country can act as a centrifugal force. Those are forces that divide. Accept any of these. When a part of a country is neglected economically by a government, the resentful local residents may attempt to gain local or regional political control. They may act out against the government that they feel favors the wealthier region. They may feel like they're not getting adequate services provided for them, and so they may act out against the government. The countries with primate cities can have a highly developed city or capital, while the rest of the country is relatively underdeveloped. This can create devolutionary pressure. People can feel as if the government does not care about them, especially if it falls along different minority group lines. And so this can lead to people being unhappy and disenfranchised and disenchanted with their government, which can cause friction and fracture. The country that is wealthier can also begin to resent having to pay more taxes to pay for the less wealthy regions in their country, and so they can begin to discriminate against those people. Any of these answers would be acceptable as long as they tie it to the uneven development, the centrifugal force, and that it leads to fracture within the state. They have to have explained this here. So 0 or 1 point, please justify that. And finally, G. For a multinational state facing the realities of devolution, explain why a government would choose to create an autonomous region or choose to maintain a unitary state. Remember, an autonomous region is a region that is still part of the country, but that acts pretty independently. Autonomous region, an example, would be Puerto Rico is an autonomous region. You see a lot of the colonies or territories still tend to act as autonomous regions. So one of the following. The creation of an autonomous region would give an ethnic group limited self-determination, meaning like they have their own self-rule and they determine what's going to happen within their borders. But this may weaken the state's control over the region's territory, the people, and the resources. So whenever a multinational state, whenever they have these devolutionary pressures, this is what it's asking. When they have these devolutionary pressures, like Spain is facing with the Basque, or the UK was facing with Scotland. This is a better example because the UK is a multinational state, and they're facing this with Scotland, where Scotland wanted to break free. They can do one of two things. They can create the autonomous region and allow that region to act pretty independently, but still stay part of the country, or they can create and maintain a unitary state, a state that is all within one country. So if they create the autonomous state, this gives the ethnic group some self-rule and keeps them within the same country and allows them to feel happier and more in control. But it may weaken the overall the country's power because it gives so much more control to that region, the people and the resources there. Or they could maintain that unitary state, which would give the government full control over the territory, the people, and the resources. But this risks rebellion against the state by the region's ethnic groups. This would be like, again, in the UK, with Scotland being unhappy with the UK. The UK saying, nope, you're going to stay with the UK. You're going to do what we say. And people of Scotland could get very mad and rebel against the country and demand even more self-rule. They could go in even more severe direction. So again, go ahead and mark this answer. Please make sure they have explained why that they would do that and what the consequences are. And then put the total there. Remember, 3 or more questions correct is a good score.